Hello, welcome to a lecture on Period 2, Later Colonial America and the Atlantic World. And we're looking at these two concepts here. They sort of have play in these ones. You can pause and read over those if you wish and have a look where they are in your notes. And so we're looking at England in the 17th century. It was a really troubled time for England and going through a lot of convulsions. There's a lot of wars and fighting over religion, the Anglicans, Catholics, and Puritans. And so the colonies, which are sort of private adventures, are largely just left alone. And this is a concept known as salutary neglect, where they're just sort of left to develop on their own. And so the colonists, as we know, it's their identity, they're very self-reliant and they're comfortable with as little government as possible. They'd rather not have England interfere with their affairs and just let them get on with their lives and their farming and their plantations and move forward. But in the 1680s, Charles II died, and his brother, the Catholic King James II, took command. And he saw the colonies as just a cash cow, something that he can just use for money for his own endeavors. Now, it's not very good that, one, he's Catholic, which the colonists in America despise Catholicism, and that he's going to interfere with their affairs, and he does. He's much more dictatorial, and he reorganized New England, said, yeah, your colonies are going to be joined together into one super colony. We're going to call it the Dominion of New England, and it'll be under the direct control of a governor appointed by King James, Governor Andros. There'll be no assemblies, no courts, and we're going to have higher taxes. You got to follow our churches, and it was Anglican churches, but their fear is that it will be later Catholic churches. Now, fortunately for the colonists, King James II was removed as the Glorious Revolution happened. As King William, who's Dutch, and his English wife sort of came by, and everybody welcomed them, and James ran away. And they said, okay, we've got to solve all these issues. We'll say, okay, the Catholic Church is supreme, but you don't have to follow it. You can do your own. And they went back to leaving the colonies, back to that sort of salutary neglect. And a new relationship's going to come in. But just to focus a little bit first on the Dominion of New England, it would have created this super state there, and it shocked the colonists, like absolutely shocking to them that King James was just so acting so aggressive in this way, and there was a lot of protest and revolt against it, and concern, of course, of the Catholicism, and it ended with the Glorious Revolution. So a new relationship emerges between London and the Crown and Parliament in London and the colonies, and one that they're sort of both happy with, sort of a new compromise. The Dominion of New England is broken up, the old colonies are re-established, and how colonial government will work is that there will be a governor, the executive, appointed by Britain, coming over from there, often a noble, and they can say no to any legislation. So the locals, the Americans, they will make up the legislature and voted in by male property holders, and they have control over the money. And so both sides have to work together to have some colonial government. And the local assembly, as much as possible, is not trying to interfere and have as low taxes as possible. And to them, taxes must go to the legislature to be used and not to England. Now, I sort of see this as a good sort of turning point within period 2. And if we're to break up period 2, which is quite big, into two distinct periods of time, in my thinking it sort of looks like this, with the first part where they're being left alone, there's the salutary neglect, and this is a period of settlement, low population, and also of the native wars. And sort of after the Glorious Revolution, getting into a sort of a golden age of commerce on the Atlantic Ocean. The piracy is very much suppressed. Trade is safe on the high seas. The British Navy is protecting merchants within the British Empire. New markets are opened up. The Navigation Acts are sort of being self-enforced, whereas before they'd be circumvented. And commercial interests are tied to between the colonies and to England. It benefits all to just follow the rules and to enjoy the benefits of the British Empire and its navy. And what does each side sort of get in this relationship? The colonies get, okay, local control, they'll be left alone. Taxes on sugar, which is one of the enumerated taxes, was lowered. There's more cooperation from the governors who are coming from England, and the colonies get more access to the lucrative slave trade and other markets, and they're guaranteed all the liberties that an Englishman would have. The English Crown, London Parliament, well, they all get cooperation from the colonists to follow the rules of the Navigation Acts and a more coordinated empire and no more sort of open revolts. And commerce just sort of booms, and you might wish to take some time to look at this map and the trading that's going on in the relationships, and we can see the American colonies are very much connected to this Atlantic trade. Slaves are really at the heart of it as a commodity and as a source of labor. And if we just sort of break down within the colonies the different economic activities that are going on, New England, we can see a lot of shipbuilding, some manufacturing, not a lot. Most people are still farmers as well, by the way. In the middle colonies, much more diversity, and that's where we get more trade happening. And in the southern colonies, that plantation society, slave society going on there. And I just want to end with the British Empire and what we can describe it as being a mercantile, fiscal, military state. And at the top of it is the crown. Right, the British Crown, the King, and Parliament, and they set up, a bureaucracy, an army, and most importantly, a navy. And then the King can grant a monopoly charter to a company like, say, the British East India Company, and they're granted a monopoly on trade in a certain region. And what do they have? Well, they have their bureaucracy and bankers as well, and they will supply back to the crown taxes and loans through their commerce, and everybody benefits from each other. The navy will protect the merchants, and the crown will receive a share of the profit and the trade. And the American colonists and merchants, they also benefit from the navy. That's all part of this system. But in time, they'll take resentment at this monopoly that some companies have over others. And, for example, when we have the Boston Tea Party, that was an attack on the British East India Company, which is part of this greater structure that is the British Empire. That it's more than just the government, it's private companies that are part of it as well, with best example, the British East India Company. Okay, so that concludes this lecture. I'd like to thank you for listening.